it almost feels like a joke that me talking about how data centers are taking up or seizing land where residential homes are being built. What?
You're not benefiting the community long term. It's kind of a one shot, like, here's the price of the land, but nothing is staying afterwards to, grow a family or pay taxes or contribute to the community. It's just a robot.
Welcome, everybody, to Inside the Flows. I'm your host, Iyassu, and I'm joined by special guests Ryan Chan and Nisheet Patel. Welcome, guys.
Hey, good morning, Iyassu. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. It's Friday, February 20th, and it's the morning time out here in sunny San Francisco. We have Nisheet out in the East Coast. Are you surviving the weather storms out there, Nisheet?
I am. We're going to get hit with another snowstorm this weekend. So prepping today. Hopefully one of the last ones, but yeah, all good out here.
Great, great. And Ryan, you're out where in the East Bay?
Yeah, just outside Concord, so Walnut Creek area. It's cold. It's like 30 degrees outside right now.
California has its own kind of weather and its own mood, and it's never too hot, never too cold. So I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
No, yeah, we're just
You
not
guys,
used
you
to
guys
it.
don't want 4 or 5 inches of snow coming on Saturday in the city?
Yeah, I'll pass on that.
No, we're not prepared for that.
Yeah, call me soft. I don't care, but I like my bland weather. So this is an exciting episode. We've got two of my favorite folks in the investment advisory space with us. Both have been on the show for the past 3 episodes, and the show's actually gotten a lot of good feedback. We've gotten a lot more subscribers than I thought in the early days. So I want to thank the audience members for listening in, commenting, liking, subscribing. It's been a tremendous joy to have these folks on the show and tell you a little bit about what's going on in the space. I think one of the challenges that I'm trying to solve for is there's a lot of really cool people that work in the investment advisory space, but don't really get a lot of sunshine. So it's really an honor to be able to bring these folks on here and just talk a little bit about what they do and how they're thinking. And so you get the insights into how the investment advisory world works, and maybe you can learn a little along the way and have some fun. So thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I think there's one quick announcement I want to make. So Inside the Flows is put on by Inflows, which is the professional networking app for registered investment advisors. And we hit a milestone this week, which was we've got quite a few new users after launching this podcast. And now we have over $9 billion in assets under management represented on the platform by financial advisors and planners and wealth managers. So, congratulations, guys. We're doing it.
No, that's awesome. That's great news. We can tell some of the engagement on the platform's been picking up. So it's good to see that representation. And, we got a couple of big events coming up in the spring. Hopefully we can keep that going and cross the 10, get hats that say 10 billion in AUM.
Yeah. That would be great.
Yeah, no, congrats to you guys, especially for, what's going on in the space, where it's going and how it's traditionally been, where, you traditionally operate in a silo. I think it's really cool what you're doing. I mean, it's one of those things where if you can't encourage people to talk and have a conversation on in a specific community, there's always that theory where where we've lost that third location outside of home and work. And I think it's really cool what Inflows is doing.
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words. Yeah, it goes back to this whole idea that when you look at the financial advisors and the wealth managers, they really are just small business owners running on like islands of their own, and they're not really competing with each other. And so if you're not competing with each other and you're not struggling, but you're running on your own, why not leverage the collective knowledge and help build or grow your practices and learn a little and maybe get some referrals here and there and whatnot. But you need the infrastructure to connect you, and I'm hoping that Inflows could be that infrastructure, that sort of connective tissue that binds us. So looking forward to the next couple of years and some more growth.
Yeah, that makes sense. Quickly, I'll just add, what drew me to this platform. My background for those new listeners and subscribers, I've got 22 years of experience at big shops, and what we all kind of recognize is the majority of advisors out there are not at big shops, and so for them to have a community to talk to, we meet small and independent, medium-sized firms at conferences all the time. They don't have home office platform people like me to bounce ideas off of or be advocates for them. They're kind of saying, hey, what financial planning software tool are you using? Or how are you tackling tax transition? Or how are you segmenting your book? everything is, people wearing multiple hats and they don't have those specialists at that level. So a platform like this, to Ryan's point, it's like it's open community. You can be honest. You're helping each other. That it provides that camaraderie and that water cooler talk that you might be missing when you're on your own, right? Frankly, like you're on an island, as you mentioned, Iyassu. So I feel like you're providing a service that most people can't get because they're not at the big shop, and that's kind of the beauty of what the platform is opening up for people.
Yeah, and it's free, right? Everyone loves a good
That too.
free service. Thanks for those kind words. I think also just on the whole connective tissue part, a couple of weeks ago, I told the audience that one of the things I'm looking forward to is conference season is kicking up, and one of the ones that I get excited about the most is Future Proof. And have you made any plans yet to go to Future Proof, Nisheet?
I have. So it's coming up in just looking at the calendar 3 weeks from now. So I will be there. I think you're going to be there, right? You're saying so. We'll be there in tow. There's plenty of good contacts and industry folks that'll be there. It's one of my favorite conferences too. Both East Coast and West Coast flavors. Really great content, good speakers, and I think at everyone I've been at, I've networked and met new great people. So looking forward to it.
Have you thought about going to Future Proof, Ryan? And before you answer that question, for folks who've never heard of Future Proof, it's a conference that's designed specifically for the financial advisor and wealth manager. It's almost like a blend between an investment advisory or financial services conference meets like Coachella, and it's like it's really fun.
That's funny.
And the best part about the Future Proof conference is that they have these things called breakout meetings, which is basically like speed dating. So you fill out your kind of dating profile of yourself and your firm, and then you submit that to the Future Proof folks, and they come back with here's a list of folks that you might be interested in meeting, and you check them off, and hopefully they check you off at the same time. And closer towards the conference, you'll get a list of folks who want to meet with you, and you check that. You basically decide to match up during the conference over the 2-3 days. There's times during the conference where it's sectioned off just for those breakout meetings, the speed dating meetings, where you sit and talk to folks for, I want to say it's like 14 minutes, maybe a little less. Hopefully half the time you get to talk and half the time they get to talk. Sometimes they talk the most and you just get like 1 or 2 minutes, but it is what it is. It's really great. I thoroughly enjoyed that conference, and I try to go to both major Future Proofs. The one in Miami that's coming up in March is called Citywide, and then just regular Future Proof in Huntington, which I believe is coming up this September. So I try to go to them. And if you're a financial advisor and you're a wealth manager, or even if you're in a single family or multifamily office, this conference is really for you.
Yeah. To add to that, I haven't made plans to go to Future Proof. I went to LPL's Focus last August, and when I'm thinking about who the target audience would be, I'm thinking of client associates, client service associates. I'm thinking of those new to the industry. I'm thinking of those in their prime and also towards the end of their careers. Pretty much these conferences hit on every single one of those bases. And while I haven't made plans to go to Future Proof, it's definitely, in the itinerary eventually.
Yeah, I was hanging out with some of your colleagues actually, Ryan, this week, and they were telling me about the LPL Focus conference. Had, I think it was like Adam Levine as like their
Yeah.
their star performer. I was like, that's pretty cool.
It was really cool. I mean, for the entire days that we were there, everything was filled with activities and events and breakout rooms and conversations. And me coming from an academic background, I really value that. I think, once you depart from a high school degree or graduate degree, it's very rare that you find yourself in a cohort or classroom again, like genuinely listening to something and like taking back that information. And I thought LPL's Focus really crushed it with that. The speakers, the content, how to actually implement the ideas that they're sharing, whether it's practice management, whether it's marketing, whether it's simple just building a team focused environment. These things really hit on all of those. and it was a lot of fun with that, and being able to end off with Adam Levine was a plus.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Adam Levine is the lead singer of Maroon 5, and sometimes he goes off on his own, and he goes by Adam Levine as his headline name, and I'd call him the king of the woohoo. He just has amazing woohoo songs. So yeah, that must have been a treat.
Yeah, it was funny because gearing up to it, advisors were talking, kind of thinking they're too cool for it, and then once you're actually like there, it was a blast. Everyone has a good time. You're hearing people saying, "This guy has no misses. All of his songs are bangers and hits," and so it was fun. It was fun to see.
Yeah, that's great. That starts us off today for intros and just kind of top of mind for Ryan, myself, and Nisheet. Now we're gonna jump into the weekly narrative. What happened in the recap this week? I think Monday, we started off with basically corporate America is replacing CEOs at the fastest clip we've seen since the post financial crisis 2010. And what's happening is the CEOs are getting younger with less experience and going into some uncertain economic times. And I think that's pretty cool. You're starting to see succession planning happening either on accident or purposely in corporate America, which is really important. You don't want to have stagnation at the executive level, particularly the CEOs who, set the strategy for these firms that you're invested in your 401ks or your retirement plans, and you're really looking to see growth in your portfolios and whatnot. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Did you guys catch that this week?
Yeah, I did. When I caught that headline, the first thing it took me to kind of sports. I'm a big sports fan, and you kind of see this happening. It started with the NFL, NBA, even Major League Baseball. There, people in their 30s, right, are getting front office leadership positions or coach manager positions. You're seeing that on the CEO side, maybe 50s. That's almost the equivalent of that. I think it shows that people are looking at young, nimble, but also need to pivot. And to your point, yes, you can't be stagnant and just kind of sit around and assume that you've got gray hair and experience, you're going to get that role. It's like you got to have energy, new ways of thinking, some dynamic problems that maybe weren't in, Harvard business case textbooks before. And now you're going to have to pivot and learn how to manage on the fly with these various generations of employees. So yeah, very interesting. But that's the first thing I thought of was like how NFL coaches now are in their 30s and not, big fat guys in their 60s.
That's a great point, and also I remember when I was working at my former employer, it was an asset management shop. It was interesting, and there was a period where women CEOs started to take on roles of these really large, like mega cap corporations, and they were being brought in to fix a lot of problems. And it was almost like they were kind of set up for failure. And there was a term called the glass cliff. So there's the glass ceiling for women executives, where they can't get past it, but then there's the glass cliff where they get the job, and then it's like basically career suicide. So like folks like Irene Rosenfeld at um, oh man, what was it? It was like the chocolate. It was Kraft. That's what it was. It was Kraft. And then the Meg Whitmans at HP, and Marissa Mayers and Carol Bartz at Yahoo. And one of the lessons that we learned from a corporate governance standpoint was that sometimes people take on jobs that are failing, and it's the only opportunity that they can take that job on. So they take it, and then you're really set up for failure. And I worry that these new executives that are coming in are coming into some uncertain times, and some of these companies may not be doing as well. And the smart guys and gals are like, yeah, I'm not taking that job. So that's my kind of like worry about the situation.
Yeah, I don't know if either of you guys watch any soccer or anything, but I'm a big Manchester United fan. I watch English Premier League, even though the time change sucks, the time difference sucks. But similar thing happening with my team, Manchester United. We've had manager after manager come in, and progressively they're getting younger and younger. And I think that we're seeing that a lot, clearly. But I think it also goes back to our conversation last time at Iyassu, where what does Gen Z, what does millennials what do millennials have to do to put themselves in positions like this? And that requires starting earlier, getting your experience, maybe starting as an intern, like a new target CEO. But it is possible. And this is just one of those reminders that if you can make the student body believe that you understand the problem and you understand the direction that the company's headed towards, it doesn't really matter your age. It almost becomes irrelevant. Um, so as Nisheet was saying.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with you. And I just stand corrected. It's Irene Rosenfeld was at Mondelez, not Kraft. So it was the Kraft, the later name, Mondelez. But yeah, I totally get it. We'll see. We'll see what goes on. The other big thing that came out on Tuesday was companies from Levi Strauss to McCormick, basically said, yeah, we're raising prices, blaming mix of labor costs, healthcare costs, and even tariffs. And we're going to talk a little bit about tariffs in a second. But yeah, man, prices are going up. I think one of the things that audience members, if you're not familiar with kind of macro, micro economics, one thing to watch out for regarding rising tariffs is that, or rising prices, is that if the prices are rising because of tariffs, the companies that are not being impacted by tariffs are also going to raise prices because there's that gap that they can fill. So it becomes this kind of cycle that you hope doesn't become a super cycle where the Fed says, okay, inflation's out of control, we got to start raising interest rates. But the reality is that prices are going up, and folks are going to start feeling the pinch.
Yeah, I think it's one of those classic textbook cases, right? Like my econ professor would be proud of me if I'm harking back to price elasticity. And there's certain things we're just going to pay no matter what it is. I also would say, we're talking about younger generations and even how we bank. I mean, I don't pay for anything in cash anymore. I don't look at stuff. So if you ask me how much salt costs, whatever McCormick is going to charge for it, I don't know. But I know that I'm going to need pepper and salt. I'm just going to buy it. And certain things, I was reading about meat prices, things that we're going to consume on a regular basis that we can't really live without. We're going to, regardless of the environment or what's causing it, we're going to pay for that and sacrifice somewhere else, or hopefully not, or take on more debt. And I think you're starting to see that if companies know they can get away with certain prices, they're going to stick to those.
Yeah, I was at the grocery store the other day, and I think I paid like 64 cents for like one garlic clove, or not clove, but like one garlic bulb. And I mean, I think that was like 16 cents last year. And so it's like those little things that you basically don't really pay too much attention to that are getting like the biggest price hikes. And you're like, what just happened here? So, watch out at the grocery store. It's a little dangerous these days.
Yeah, I saw something online. I wish I took a screenshot of it, but it was talking about the price of goods now within the last 2 years. It seems, or just 2 to 5 years, it seems, yeah, we're fighting inflation. But then if you look at it from, say, 2010, 2012, the chart that I was looking at, which I have no idea is actually accurate or not, but it almost is linear, going directly upwards. And so once you start taking the perspective where that's coming from, yeah, sure, this might seem minuscule, but look at where we came from. We came all the way from down here. And so, man, I mean, eggs aren't getting cheaper, salt's not getting cheaper, garlic cloves aren't getting cheaper. So it's just, it's interesting.
Yeah. So that took us into the midweek. I think the biggest news was that in our world, the investment advisory world, that this fintech company called Altruist rolled out their new AI platform. They called it Hazel, and it was a tax planning tool that once that came out, I think Charles Schwab and Raymond James and even LPL during the day, because they're publicly traded stocks, like it hit them pretty hard. And so it's basically the wealth management tech layer is starting to get the AI bug, and whoever's going to come out on top of that is going to steal business from all the other players that are doing it the historical way. And have you guys ever used or demoed out Altruist's platforms? I know they do custody stuff, so I'm not sure if your firms would use it, but have you guys gone to a conference where they have the little, demo table and, they show you what they can do? And have you checked out any of the Altruist stuff and looked into Hazel?
I'd say, I have not. The short answer is I've not. I will say, though, I think there's a lot of elements of AI and data efficiency and technology that's been seeping into advisor tech stack for years and years. I think AI, it was overblown. There's a headline, it scares people. Charles Schwab CEO even came out and said, look, that you're getting it backwards. Like, this is only going to create efficiencies for our advisors and actually create margins and better results for clients. And this hits home for me in my space just because we're home office, we're wealth platform management. All we do is serve our financial advisors. All we do is want to make their day more efficient, have them spend more time in front of clients and talking to clients as opposed to crunching numbers and trying to figure out what taxes are going to look like. So any kind of AI help is going to benefit us because of a shrinking labor force and increased demand. So I thought it was way overblown. I think you're going to see AI popping up everywhere, already creeping up into some places. The altruist thing just kind of got out there ahead of ahead of the news, but there's a lot of other companies that have just this cool technology that's helping everybody across the board.
Yeah, to bounce off that, I haven't used it either. I haven't really experienced it. I was invited to share at St. Mary's College the role of AI in the financial services space, and quite frankly, that it depends on where you are, to be totally honest, because all of these AI tools can continue to come out, but whether or not they pass compliance tools to make sure that clients' information is secured and safe, that's an entirely different animal. And so, I mean, you've seen there's other apps like I think it's called Origin, the first AI financial advisor, or something like that. And then you also have some of these robo advisors through some of these bigger banks. There are these tools available, and it's definitely not going anywhere. But I would tend to lean to agree with Nisheet where there are more people that need assistance, and there are only more people coming down the pipeline that need assistance. That goes beyond just what a computer will tell you. It I told you last time, Iyassu, a lot of it is just, you can call it psychological behavioral psychology, and you can also call it philosophy, whichever one you decide. And I tend to come up from the philosophy side. People need to be able to orient themselves and like conduct themselves during market volatility and market skepticism. But when these AI tools come out where they're designed to help advisors or help individuals make financial decisions, there's compliance risks in that. There's like, how much information do you actually want to be sharing with these online tools? Do you want to be putting in your social? Do you want to be putting in your Form 1040 or something? There's a lot of gray areas still to iron out, and I think only time's going to tell where this is going to go. But I do think it will be a productivity boost eventually.
Yeah, that's how I looked at it. I thought of it as, kind of a cool new tool to use. Based off what I read, you just kind of plug in your tax document, and then it spits out, hey, here's some areas you, wealth manager, should explore on reducing this client's tax burden. And I thought that was cool. I was like, okay, this is, it's a reality. I agree with you that, there are some compliance matters that you have to kind of get through before you start submitting information like that to a third party. But yeah, the productivity gains, I think, is going to be worth it in the future, especially as we keep talking about how there are going to be less advisors and wealth managers in the future than there are today. Like, they're just, something has to give, and it's probably going to be the technology floodgates open.
Which I hope they do. I hope more technology comes out and more available to advisors, but I struggle to completely agree that if you just go fully independent, if you go RIA, that you'll be able to use all of these AI tools, because that's not the case. You still have compliance. You still have a responsibility to make sure your client's information is secure to help you make decisions. And I still think we have some ways to go.
Yeah, that's the kind of crazy thing that no one really talks about, these AI tools and technology. It's not just you who has to get used to or understand the technology behind it. Like, you have to train your compliance teams, and a lot of times those folks don't have a tech background. And so that's going to be a lift in on itself. So I don't know. Maybe we could get like a compliance person on the podcast and just ask them, like, what do you go through? Like, what's your checklist when one of your companies or one of your clients is trying to adopt something like this? So I bet you it's kind of gnarly. Moving on to the last Thursday, I wanted to throw this one in here. it was a funny one. Ryan and I last week talked about just kind of beef prices and beef, and it actually came up again. I think the Wall Street Journal wrote a report on beef prices at like basically all-time highs. They finally like explained what I was trying to say during the last episode, which is, look, the cattle herd is at 75-year lows, and it's not going to go up anytime soon. There's just too many factors involved with trying to get more cows other than importing them. Beef prices are going to be high or elevated for a long time. And I don't know. I think Nisheet and Ryan, I think we're gonna have to all like, if you're a burger lover, you can't get that thick burger anymore. You got to go to the smash burger, just like super thin, and just start enjoying smash burgers because beef's not coming down anytime soon. So uh, I want to throw that one in there as a follow up from last week.
Sounds like yeah, thinning numbers in financial advisors and cows is going to impact where we're going with this. So yeah, thinner burgers. I read that piece in the journal. It's something I never really thought about. What was it? Maybe a couple years ago, when all like the Beyond Meats and Impossible Meat, like they all became really popular, went public, and folks thought that might be the future. I know I've had that. The Impossible Whopper tastes like pretty decent, but I still want like a regular Whopper. And now Iyassu told me to get a thinner one. Like that's not going to work. That's where like I think people are going to spend. If they want to celebrate something or they want to spoil themselves with real red meat at some point, once a month or whatever, they'll just cut back in other places. But yeah, if you're talking about land scarcity, less cows, if you're gonna have production costs, inflation, that's all going to work into this, and then prices are going to go up, probably stay up.
Yeah, it's an American pastime. Like you want your burger, and you want a specific burger, right? And cutting back kind of sucks, but as prices go up, what can you do, right? People are pinching everywhere nowadays. I think though the interesting thing about the article, and I encourage the audience members, I'll put a link to it inside the description and just read it, is the impacts of the extreme weather events. I know a lot of people get a lot of flack for talking about climate change and all that, but when you get down to the cattle ranchers and the actual farmers, if they're going through a multi-year drought, that's kind of science based, and it actually takes a long time to get a cow from being a little baby to a full-fledged cow that you're going to go send to the slaughter. If you can't grow the feed for your cows, well then you're just going to have to shrink your herd. And yeah, it's simple supply demand. Supply gets smaller, demand gets higher, price goes up, and that's just how it is.
I would add more to that. It's just it almost feels like fighting against the tide. We sound like broken records talking about the cost of living and where things are going, and it just seems like everything's more expensive. And each new week, you get a new report talking about this is more expensive than ever. This is more expensive than ever. If you scale that more to a 30,000-foot view, there is some pressures at play macroeconomically. How the imports and exports are going to counteract each other to support these farmers and to expand these cattle herds. At the end of the day, I mean, if you're shopping at Whole Foods or something, you're going to be paying a different price than if you're buying your meat at Safeway or something. So you're going to see, as Nisheet was saying, where you're going to start cutting down on one end, start paying more on another end during your monthly spend, and it's just going to be something that's going to continue to play until things can start leveling out a little bit more. But I think that flows into later a conversation around the administration's tariff policy.
Yeah, but why don't we just jump into that? Because at the end of the day, even with prices, rising and whatnot, I think the winner is going to be the shareholder, right? Because they're the one benefiting from the increased returns on all these price increases. So the big news for this morning was that the Supreme Court struck down the administration's tariff policies. And so that is kind of flowing through the market right now. That's pretty big news, actually, because it was a tool that the administration was using to get better, terms on certain trade deals amongst different nations that, may have been taking advantage of the existing rules that were on the book. And I think this is a setback for the administration. They're going to have to figure out other ways to kind of level the playing field. Companies who were importing, a lot of their goods for their supply chain are going to start to see a lot of relief. And I don't think the customer is going to get like a refund check, but those companies who have been under pressure due to the tariffs to either raise prices or eat those prices, I don't think they have to worry as much anymore going forward.
Yeah, I think from a market perspective, we were just talking about pricing. Like those companies are not going to lower their price back
Yeah.
or adjust back, right?
Hmm.
If we're used to paying something higher with the tariff. And for me, not even bringing politics into it, just from a market perspective, I think the market wants to see consistency and not have crazy variables. So you're seeing the markets go up today, I think mainly to say, hey, the Supreme Court said, look, power cannot be with one person over pricing like this. And the fear of something happening and all of a sudden the country gets a tariff tomorrow and how that impacts a consumer good company, hopefully the market doesn't have to worry about that. So today you're seeing a lot of retailers and consumer goods companies, stock go up a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to start with the same thing. Prices aren't going to get cheaper all of a sudden. They're not going to go down just because of this. But again, it comes more to a macroeconomic. What's going to change there, and hopefully production can start getting a little cheaper for some of these farmers, and they can start investing back into more of their cattle now that their overhead might be a little bit less expensive. But it's going to take time. It took time for this stuff to settle in, even after the tariff tantrum in April. It's going to take time to rebuild off of it as well.
Yeah, and these companies are not just sitting there. They have really smart people trying to figure everything out, and they'll make their moves when they need to. And we'll see how the market responds as a whole. But you got some really smart people figuring this stuff out. I think the conversation we just had about price increases, price sensitivities is a good segue into our kind of special topic. Ryan sent over this pretty cool article this week that kind of blew my mind. I didn't realize how impactful data centers are regarding land acquisitions. And he sent over this article about what's going on in Virginia, and I was blown away at how these bids that are going on for certain lands that traditionally or they were planned to go to new homes from developers are actually going to data centers at like what is this, 5 to 6, 7, 10, 20 times multiples of what they would have paid for these parcels of land. So I was blown away, and I think that's a really relevant topic for these days. Is Google and Amazon, or sorry, Google and OpenAI and Microsoft and Nvidia start building out these massive data centers like that need to have certain resources really close to them, like power and water, which traditionally it'd be nice to build a home next to those. Every society needs easy access to water, energy, and just food. So these data centers are taking those resources, or they need those resources as well. So I know, Ryan, like take us through your thoughts on this article, and I'll post it. I'll post a link to it in the description. But take us through your thoughts on this, because I was pretty blown away.
Yeah, I mentioned on the last call where it almost feels like a joke that me talking about how data centers are taking up or seizing land where residential homes are being built. What? It feels like satire saying that. But it's the new reality, and this is kind of the shift that you see when you start talking and focusing on America first. What does that mean? Well, if we're starting to transition from overseas and exporting and importing, outsourcing these types of facilities, and now we want to start bringing it to the states, whether it's in the states, whether it's overseas, there's a finite amount of land for individuals and for corporations. And now we are directly seeing a collision between the two, where corporations are taking over this land. We're having this, call it a housing crisis for Gen Z and millennials, where prices are going so far under their budget that these data centers are buying things that I think one of the metrics was like $2 million an acre in some place, or like 600. There was like 2 million, and there was like 600,000 depending on the location. how is a millennial or Gen Z supposed to compete with that when these companies are backed with corporate funding? There's that's just it's a losing battle. And again, it feels like satire saying that, but that's what happens when you start having macroeconomic shifts like that, where you're going to stop outsourcing this stuff, start building it locally. And then I think it's going to come down to more micro after that. What are the counties doing? What are the states doing? What are the counties doing to protect residents from these types of structures? Because these structures are run by computers. They're not run by laborers. It is not a labor producing activity outside of the actual construction of it itself. So I think that's an important counterbalance to kind of think about where the direction's headed. Where are these things being located? If they're being pushed closer and closer to more of these, they're never going to be put in metropolitan areas, but like closer towards these farmers' lands and some of these people that are buying their retirement home and it's getting put right across the street from their retirement property. That's going to have a significant impact on where the next generation goes. That's why I brought up new construction homes. Think about all the new retirees are building their own home. Why? It's because they want to staple this stuff. There's a lot of stuff at hand, and unfortunately, I don't have an answer for it. I don't think anyone really does, because this interplay between the two is going to be something that we're going to be living with for as long as AI lasts, I think.
Did you have any thoughts on that, Nisheet?
Yeah, no, I mean, but it's not real estate. There isn't my cup of tea. But definitely an interesting article and showing how it's a tricky balance, because folks use real estate and land sometimes as their most valuable asset. I know, in the last couple of months, the administration's tried to put policy in place to prevent PE firms from doing this. Right, when they were buying up homes and essentially using them as investments, and all of a sudden, that young couple, Ryan, that you're talking about, is competing with Blackstone's real estate portfolio for a townhouse. And like, that shouldn't
Yeah.
be the case either, right? So you solve one problem, now here come the robots trying to buy the house. Like, it's crazy. All this data center technology is just going to your point, it sounds like sci-fi, it sounds like satire, but the reality's here. It's going to start coming faster than we think. So that it's just, I don't know how you solve that, right? If you're a town municipality in need of money, and someone's going to come and pay for a lot of land that's quadruple what the a residential construction company is going to make. Like, you have to really have a strong case to stand on to say, we're going to turn down that money and do the right thing, which, morally, sure, like, let's create homes. But, at the end of the day, sometimes if you need money to pay for schools or something else, you might sacrifice that. So I think it's going to be an interesting battle across the country, right? We have a large, diverse topography, and depending on where people go and where they want to settle down or what land is used for, I think it'll be really interesting to see where that goes.
Like, even if you're not knowledgeable about land acquisitions and home development, the thing that, if you just read the numbers, it's like staggering. So I pulled up that article, and the tech giants in Northern Virginia are outbidding home builders, turning $50 million residential parcels of land into $700 million acquisitions. So, like, Northern Virginia has a 75,000 home shortage in its area, and the land developers are like, I can do 50 million or I can do 700 million. It's staggering. And to your point about millennials having to have this conversation of possibly not having a home anytime soon. The home builders, this is part of our conversation last week, the home builders are just not building anymore. Before the housing, or before the great financial crisis, they were pumping out 2 million homes a year, and now they're in the six figures, mid to low six figures, and the home builders are targeting higher income, households, much higher income households, because they want higher margins on each home that they're selling. So again, there has to be a policy change, because you just can't have this many people without homes unless you're really willing to piss off a whole generation of, future home buyers. That's just it's just staggering to me.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that. Was it? I'm not sure which part of Europe it was, but I saw that they were the first to start implementing guardrails around AI, what it can do, how the public can use it. That was the first. This was like at the beginning of the year. But I think it's really important that we do that not only from a software perspective, but also on a more construction perspective of where this land's being put. Um, but someone I know that's more in the software world, her name's Sarujana Kataramove. She was part of a community called AI evangelists. That's what they called themselves because they were surrounded themselves and focused on ethical AI development. And what does that mean? But specifically designed for individuals. How is it going to be used? What data is going to be collected? And I think that exact kind of methodology behind it, I feel like that's headed in the right direction for, where these policies should come from. You know, do you want a data center right outside your house, shining bright lights at you? I doubt it. So what what happens? What do you choose? But to your point, Yasu, it these companies are bringing millions to almost trillions of dollars to create something in a plot of land in the United States. How is a local county going to say no to that? It's, I mean, you're going to essentially almost force everybody out, but what do you do?
Yeah, it's like, but you get to close that budget gap that you've had for the past two
Yeah.
cycles, right? Like that's the part that gets scary because I don't know if you guys have ever been part of like of a neighborhood association, but I was, and when we would get developers who wanted to build a new condo, or build something new on the residential side, they have to do their community engagement as part of what the city requires them to do in order to get their permits. And these developers, they have lobbyists and they pay them a lot of money and they figure out ways to get your city council or get your mayor to get on their side because they're like, hey, we're gonna bring in a lot of money that's gonna go to the general fund, right? So the general fund, the council members and the mayor get to spend it as they see fit. It's not it's not going to very specific causes that may benefit you in your own area that the new section is being developed. So like that all gets mixed in with data centers. And it becomes very, very tempting if you're facing a budget shortfall to choose, do I want to sacrifice some future homes that don't exist right now and they're not voters right now? Or do I want to, close down, maybe fire a couple of firemen or policemen and then get the backlash from all the police unions or not? That's the choice that, that they're gonna have to like face. And so it gets really, really tricky.
Yeah. Uh, a question for you, Nisheet, as far as when with these data centers being built in certain local communities like this, I mean, you talked about the macro to micro supply and demand shift and kind of what that means. I don't know if you know the answer to this or anything, or just kind of like I'm just asking your thoughts
Yeah.
of where or how does the labor and kind of population supply come from with this type of stuff? I mean, where do you think that?
You brought I think you brought up a great point. It's such a unique thing because any other, even if it's a controversial development of land, was labor producing, right?
Mhm.
You needed labor to build the thing. Let's use like a casino, for example, right? Like I live in New York. I got like licenses for casinos that want to pop up, and they were trying to put one up in the middle of Times Square, and other people wanted it out in Queens or upstate. And it's like you want to, the state wants to benefit from those revenues, but then the people don't want it in their own community. They want it
Mhm.
somewhere else. They want it far away. They don't want gambling and all the vices that come with it to be, within walking distance of their apartment or their home. So, but at least those things created jobs and created like people, human energy benefit. For this, to answer your question, I would think that labor to produce the data center is very temporary. It comes in, it puts it up, and then it leaves. And so you're not benefiting the community long term. It's kind of a one shot, like here's the price of the land but nothing is staying afterwards to, grow a family or pay taxes or contribute to the community. It's just a robot. It's more of like a, the scene out of Matrix. Like you have these towers that just like live there. They're not contributing to society or the community. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see where these things go. Because yeah, Ryan, you brought up a great point. It's not labor producing. The labor is going to come in and put it up, but then there's no forward benefit of like if you built a stadium or a casino, there's like revenue and entertainment and society, like there's feelings of things you can do. This is going to be a cold, empty building, right?
Well, there'll be security guards. You got to make sure that these like foreign nations don't come in and like spy on us, through our data servers.
It makes it sound like we're saying it's a really bad thing, but at the end of the day, we're in an energy shortage. We need these types of facilities to store data, to mine the data, to do all these types of things. And it's from an America First perspective, it makes sense, but it at the cost of residential homes.
Yeah, well, with that said, I want to move us to my favorite part of the show, which I asked our guests what are they looking forward to next week, and what are they watching out for, anything that's concerning. So I guess I'll either one of you want to take that jump ball.
Again, I'm not a big short-term news guy. I feel like whenever we talk about this stuff, so for example, when I start writing my newsletters, the first thing I do is start reading some articles, see what I can summarize that I feel like is important enough to share. When you do this, you get incredibly negative feelings after you start reading this stuff. This changed, and you forget about the first article we read today, where CEOs are getting younger. That's a good sign. I feel like that's a good sign for the community, and so I'm more excited to see what the market's going to bring next week. Kind of where things are going to settle out. Obviously, we've had a lot of volatility since the start of the year.
Yeah, I think it's coming off this morning's news on the tariffs. I'd be interested to see what comes out over the weekend, both from economic policy and how this impacts the consumer, and then also a lot of the people saying like, "Hey, the Supreme Court actually did its job." I think in one of the dissent pieces, it was like, "Hey, there's gonna be a problem trying to figure out how to return the money," and the court was like, "That's not our job. Our job is to figure out what's constitutional, and you guys figure out what you're supposed to do next." I thought that took a lot of courage, so I'm interested to see the creative ways of how this is going to work out, the spin from a political side, but also for what we care about in terms of economics and markets. To Ryan, to your point, we're building some momentum or strength in the markets and can carry us into March. So I'd be interested to see how we end next week, end the month next week.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to thank both of you gentlemen for joining us today on episode 4 of Inside the Flows. If you want to keep the conversation going and you are a financial advisor or a wealth manager, join Inflows, where we have an exclusive community for you to have these kinds of conversations. And you'll find us there. You can ask either Nisheet or Ryan a question, pop in, maybe talk shop about what's going on in your space, and leverage that collective knowledge. We'll be there, and I want to thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.